I was 7 when it first happened. I never had much in the way of friends. Same with Cash. Come to think of it, I was doing what I'd always done when I was bored at that age, playing in the field near my parents' small wooden cabin. We were poor, very little to do when your parents didn't make much money. They had to spend it on important stuff like heating and the taxes. Often times I was glad just to have running water and a bed to sleep in at night. Anyway, the field, it was surrounded by woodland, and all the trees being tall, skinny conifers, mostly spruce with outstretched limbs that clawed at the sky. The field was quite large and was perfect for imitating my favorite scenes from all manner of media and literature. I would pretend to be Darth Vader fighting Luke Skywalker, or Captain Jack Sparrow making a narrow escape, or even Valkyrie Kane wielding magic to save the world once again. My father worked as a low-level convenience employee. My mother, well, she tried to work as a prostitute, often taking our rusty old Ford pickup truck into the city. She tried, she did, but I knew she hated it. Her and Dad had discussed it, argued for days, and then he finally gave in. As long as she had the contraceptive method at the ready. We couldn't afford another child. Even though she worked, she rarely got customers. She was over 40 years old and a bit too plump for most folks prowling the streets. It was like any ordinary day. I had come home from school, my mother having to drive me into the city in order to get there. After school, I took the bus as close as it would take me to the forest where I lived. It was usually an hour-long walk to get home from there. After that walk, I always went to the field, making my way through the conifer trees and humming my favorite songs. Most of what I entertained myself with during my time in the field came from my imagination. I would occasionally get to watch movies and videos on the school's computer during the lunch hour. I always signed out as many books as I was allowed to from the school's library. I was in the field. I don't remember quite the story I had made up for myself that time, but it doesn't matter. I was in the field, like always when it happened. He came from the woods. Most strange things do. A man of long and thin proportions who pushed between the hundreds of conifer needles and scraggly branches. I was at the opposite end of the field, as he was, and I simply watched him walk towards me, taking huge, exaggerated strides with his spider-like legs. He was about halfway across when I finally got the sense that I should run from this man, this creature. I tried to, but my movements were sluggish and I didn't get 5 paces before he was in front of me. I didn't know what he was at first, but without the man saying a single word, I knew him as Mr. Longnose, and I knew what he wanted. Mr. Longnose was wearing a simple, dark red trench coat that swished the grass at his feet. He had tall, black combat boots on his feet and a pair of mirrored sunglasses perched upon his nose. And what a nose he had! Even though his disturbingly tall and gangly form, not to mention his arms that draped all the way down to his feet, was downright horrifying, his nose scared me the most. It stretched out from his face like a bird beak, pale, white like the rest of his skin, and curved downwards sharply. The appendage seemed as though it should have weighed down his head, especially because his neck was so wiry. He didn't say anything, but I suddenly became aware that Mr. Longnose wanted me to play a game. He didn't speak, but I could hear a voice, or some sort of presence that began counting down from 60. It resonated from Mr. Longnose like a pulse. Instructions had appeared in my mind. I had to hide from Mr. Longnose, so I started to run. I ran across the field into the woods between the trees towards my house. Soon, my throat was raw from the exertion, and I dropped behind a fallen tree to catch my breath. I could hear something walking through the soft pine needles. A few twigs cracked. Mr. Longnose was looking for me. His game was hide and seek, an entertainment that I was familiar with. I could feel the air from his movements and sense the swish of his coat. My teeth were chattering. My tongue was cold and dry. I felt antsy and paranoid. I couldn't stay still any longer. I scrambled to my feet and I ran. I didn't get far before Mr. Longnose came into my peripheral vision. He was still taking those extensive steps. His head turned towards me. I could see my ramshackled home in the distance, and I could hear my father using his mallet to pound nails and seal the hole in the roof. "Dad! Dad would help me!" I screamed. Mr. Longnose was right behind me now. He was making some sort of clicking noise, like the sound of a metal fork on someone's teeth. My foot caught on a log, and I was sent sprawling into the dirt. When I looked up, Mr. Longnose was looming over me. One of his hands came forward and touched my chest. A pain so intense forced my muscles rigid, and I let out a loose cry so loud that my voice was hoarse within seconds. And I still kept wailing as Mr. Longnose plunged his skinny phalanges deep into my flesh. My vision blurred until it was just a mass of grey and brown. When I woke up, Mr. Longnose was gone, and my father was cradling me in his bulky arms. My father immediately pointed out a tattoo on the left side of my neck. It was shaped like the plague doctor mask from the 1600s. I didn't know what it was when I first saw it, but my dad enlightened me, telling me it was something old doctors wore in medieval times. Of course, we were both perplexed because I had never gotten a tattoo. I was only 7 after all. I was confused and disorientated from my experience, so my response was bleary and gobsmacked my father. "No, Dad, that looks like Mr. Longnose," was what I said. He tried to ask me what I meant, but I'd gone catatonic. I'd stay that way for a week after I met Mr. Longnose. I saw Mr. Longnose 3 more times. The second time, after the first incident, he appeared in a cafe when I was in London. I'd been 13 years old at the time, and my parents were better off at that point. I tried to call for help from the other patrons, but they only looked confused. It seemed as though I was the only one who could see Mr. Longnose. I ran from the cafe and into the street. I ran and didn't look behind me. I was faster this time, so I had already put quite some distance between myself and Mr. Longnose. All was looking well until a car swerved around the corner and crunched against me. I could hear Mr. Longnose getting closer, but my legs wouldn't push me off the ground. He reached me and touched me with his hands again. I awoke in the hospital this time, and there was a tattoo of an eye on my right palm. The third total time, I didn't have a chance. He woke me up while I was sleeping in my apartment, still living in London. I was 21 then. He began to count down, and I only made it down to the elevator and out the front door before he caught me. Again, another stab of agony and a new marking on my flesh. Now, I had a black rhombus tattoo on my left cheek. After that third encounter, I received a package in the mail. It was a plain brown shipping box. There was no weight in it. The only pressure on my hands was from the box itself. I took it up to my room and I opened it. There was nothing inside but a piece of paper. It had 3 symbols on it, left to right. First was the plague doctor mask, identical to the one emblazoned on my neck. Next was the eye, again the exact same as the marking on my palm. Then the rhombus, identical. There was a message beneath the sigils. You have been found 3. If there is 2 more, Mr. Longnose will claim you. 5 is all he needs. Hide for 3 more and Mr. Longnose will be impressed. When Mr. Longnose is impressed, hide and seek is over. There was no signature, just a picture of a crudely drawn face with a hideously long nose that I recognized very well. The 4th total time was different. This time I was prepared for Mr. Longnose. As soon as I heard his countdown, I hopped into my car and I started driving. It hadn't been 5 years since the last time. I had just turned 26. I drove for hours, no place in mind, as long as it was anywhere away from Mr. Longnose. I stopped many times for gas until I ran out of money. I saw Mr. Longnose in the distance, taking his giant cartoonish steps directly towards me. 3 weeks later, I was still going. I had drawn money from my bank account to keep buying gas to stay away from Mr. Longnose. Distance doesn't seem to be too much of a trifle for him. I started my fleeing in London, and after 3 weeks, I had gone across the English Channel and into France, then from France to Switzerland and on to Germany. Another week and I had gone across the Czech capital and was in the middle of Slovakia. In 4 weeks, I had travelled all across Europe and was actually considering taking the drive to Greece. But then, all of a sudden, I got an air of snap tension in my mind. And during a short rest stop at a restaurant, I knew it. Mr. Longnose was gone. For now at least. Since then, I've worked out a way to estimate when Mr. Longnose will come for me. He seems to appear about every 4 to 7 years and will seek me for at least 3 weeks or so. If he makes any physical contact with me, I will lose that game of hide and seek. Mr. Longnose has won 4 games of hide and seek so far, and there have been 6 in total. I recently won the 5th game of hide and seek. 2 down, 1 to go. I'm quite a bit older now. I think I'm at least 60, or close to that point. All I need to do is win 1 more game and Mr. Longnose will leave me alone. But Mr. Longnose only needs to win 1 more game to claim me. Whatever that means. I'm an old man and my memory is foggy. I've been checked for memory ailments and been diagnosed with at least 1. I'm writing the whole story down for myself in a recent moment of clarity. It's been 6 years since I've seen Mr. Longnose. And even while I write this, I can feel his foreboding presence getting closer. Once I finish this document, I'll print out some copies and put it up on the wall so I don't forget Mr. Longnose is coming. I don't know if I'll even get that far away. With the way I can sense Mr. Longnose, he's very close. I need to go. All I need to take is my food, water, my cash and my car. Guns don't seem to work on Mr. Longnose. Bullets just disappear before they hit him. Knives, pipes, axes, none of that does anything to him. He's getting closer. I can feel it. Mr. Longnose is ready for our last game, and there's no way in hell I will let him win it.